The moment the billionaire's hand struck the air, slicing through the silence of the marble-floored lobby, the entire crowd froze as if time itself had forgotten to move. People stared, their eyes wide with disbelief and fear, breaths caught in their throats, their feet rooted to the ground. At the center of the growing ring of onlookers stood Ethan Granger, the billionaire known for building empires and crushing competitors with equal ease. His face burned with anger, his chest rising and falling sharply, and standing before him, trembling, holding her swollen belly, was his pregnant wife, Lila, eyes shimmering with painful tears she refused to let fall. No one moved, no one spoke, no one dared even breathe too loudly. It was as if the entire world had agreed to silently watch cruelty unfold, hoping to escape the consequences that stepping forward might bring. But someone would step in, someone who had nothing to lose except the one thing he valued most, his humanity. If you believe kindness, courage, and second chances still matter in this world, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. For years, James Holloway had cleaned floors, emptied bins, polished brass rails, and swept corners invisible to others, all while raising his little daughter alone. He worked the night shift as a janitor in the very building where Ethan Granger ruled from the top floors. No one cared about men like James. No one even greeted him unless they needed something. But his daughter, Ella, was his world. Everything he did was for the tiny girl who waited for him every morning with mismatched socks and warm hugs smelling faintly of cereal. And it was that same quiet softness inside him that made it impossible, utterly impossible, for James to stand still while a woman and an unborn child faced harm right in front of him. The moment Ethan's rage-filled gesture cracked through the lobby, James was sweeping in the corner, behind a pillar, unseen by most. He wasn't invisible by choice, but by the nature of his job. Yet his heart saw everything. He watched Lila flinch, watched eyes avert, watched powerful men pretend to be busy with their phones, watched a receptionist frozen like a statue carved in fear. And then he saw Ethan step forward again, his voice low and vibrating with malice, a storm about to break. Something inside James snapped, not in anger but in protective instinct. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, and absolute. The kind of decision that defines a man's soul. He dropped the broom. The clatter echoed through the lobby like a small explosion. All eyes shifted toward the sound, and before anyone could think, James stepped through the circle of onlookers. Not fast, not aggressive, but with a calm that stood in stark contrast to the chaos unfolding. His face was steady. His shoulders squared, his eyes focused only on Lila and the unborn child she held protectively with trembling hands. The billionaire turned sharply toward him, shock flashing across his face. No janitor had ever approached him, much less interfered with anything he did. But James didn't see Ethan's wealth, influence, or power. He saw only a man hurting someone who couldn't defend herself. Every nerve in the lobby tightened. For a brief moment, even the light seemed to hesitate. James didn't speak. There was no bold declaration, no heroic speech. Instead, he positioned himself between Ethan and Lila with a silent firmness that said more than any words ever could. Lila stared at him with wide, tear-filled eyes, eyes that begged for someone to still believe in goodness. Ethan's face twisted with rage, but James did not move, did not blink, did not back away. He simply stood there, breathing steadily, his calmness an anchor in the storm. Those watching felt something shift in the room, something powerful and unexpected. Courage from the lowest-paid man in the building had just exposed the cowardice of everyone else who remained silent. The billionaire demanded that James step aside, but the janitor didn't even twitch. He wasn't fighting Ethan. He was protecting Lila. And it was that distinction that changed everything. Lila's lips quivered as she whispered the softest thank you, though no one heard it but James. He gave her the faintest nod as if to say, "You're safe now." Security guards hesitated, unsure whether to intervene for the man who signed their paychecks or for the man doing the right thing. Cameras captured everything. And in that moment of hesitation, in that breath of uncertainty, Lila stepped back from Ethan's reach, her hand clinging to James's sleeve the way someone drowning clings to air. Ethan barked orders, but the crowd's energy had shifted. People still didn't speak, but their silence wasn't compliance anymore. It was judgment. James guided Lila away slowly, making sure she stayed steady. His hands were gentle, the same way he held his daughter's small hand every morning as they walked to her school bus. Lila felt, perhaps for the first time in months, the safety of another human being's sincerity. After that day, nothing remained the same. Word spread like wildfire. A camera phone video leaked online, circulating before Ethan's public relations team even woke up the next morning. The world saw the moment when a billionaire's fury met a janitor's courage. Some doubted, some defended, many were shocked, but almost everyone agreed on one thing: James Holloway had shown a bravery that transcended class, status, or fear. Ethan Granger, furious at the threat to his reputation, decided to strike back where he had power. By sunrise, James received a termination notice. No severance, no apology, just a command to clear out his locker and leave. The message was clear: courage had a price. James accepted the letter with a quiet sigh. He needed the job, desperately. His daughter depended on it. The rent depended on it. The medication for her asthma depended on it. But he didn't regret stepping in. Not for a second. He walked home that morning with heavy shoes but a clear conscience. Little Ella noticed immediately that her father's shoulders looked lower than usual. She tugged on his sleeve, her little voice filled with concern. James forced a smile, lifting her into his arms and kissing the top of her head. She didn't know what losing a job meant, but she sensed her father's hurt, the way only children with big hearts do. 2 days later, Lila appeared at the small apartment complex where James lived, holding a trembling hand over her stomach. She had tracked him down, unsure if he would even open the door. But James did, and Lila broke down the moment she saw him. She told him that after the incident in the lobby, she had finally found the courage to leave Ethan. The public pressure, the scandal, the growing outrage, everything helped push her toward the exit she should have taken long ago. But she was afraid. She had no family, no safe place, no one she trusted, except the man who had stood between her and the person she once thought she couldn't live without. James offered her a seat, his apartment small and modest, but warm and filled with little Ella's colorful drawings taped to the walls. Lila cried again, not out of sadness now, but out of relief. Here, in this tiny 2-room home, she felt safer than she ever had in her marble mansion. James didn't judge her. He didn't question her choices. He simply listened. Days turned into weeks. Lila stayed at a women's shelter James helped her find. He checked in on her often, never overstepping, always respectful, treating her like a person worth protecting, not like a fragile bird or a damsel in need of rescue. And slowly, Lila rediscovered her own strength. Meanwhile, the video of the lobby continued to spread. Journalists began looking into Ethan's past. Witnesses came forward anonymously, and the facade of the perfect billionaire philanthropist began to crumble. One morning, a representative from a local community organization contacted James, asking if he would be willing to work with them as a spokesperson for anti-abuse programs. They had seen the viral video and believed the world needed more men like him. They weren't offering much money, but they offered dignity, purpose, a chance to turn a moment of courage into a lifetime of impact. James accepted. Surprisingly, donations poured in from strangers who had been touched by his quiet bravery. Some gave $5, some $500, but all gave from the heart. Enough money was raised to cover his rent for months, buy better medications for Ella, and even enroll her in the little art program she had always dreamed about. But the most unexpected support came from Lila. Months after their lives intersected in that fateful lobby, she invited James and Ella to the hospital as she prepared to give birth. Not because she was alone, though she technically was, but because she felt James had already shown more care for her child than the billionaire ever had. And when her baby was placed in her arms, she looked at James with tear-filled gratitude that words could never capture. Life didn't become perfect overnight. James still struggled. Lila still had moments of deep fear. Ella still worried about her father working too hard. But something new had started growing. Something stronger than fear, richer than money, and more precious than comfort. Hope. Their lives intertwined, not as hero and victim, not as savior and saved, but as people who understood the cost of kindness and the price of courage. Lila found her stability, James found new purpose, Ella found another caring adult who saw her potential. And over time, the three of them built something that felt like family, not rushed, not forced, but formed slowly, like dawn breaking after a long night. And that, perhaps, was the real miracle. Not the moment James stepped in, but the world they built because he did. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps us continue bringing powerful human stories to life. Before you go, tell us in the comments, what does courage mean to you?